Rin here with your brief but thorough guide to all things kicking, covering everything from the basics to the advanced tips and tricks. But starting off at the very beginning, Boost Kick is an ability you unlock through OS tuning. You do need OST chips, so it'll be required that you have access to the arena before you can unlock Boost Kick, but it's a good early option. Boost Kicking is a close-range dash attack that does considerable stagger and damage to enemies. It's a great way to completely stagger your opponent, or to toss into your combos just to add a little extra damage. When it comes to how your legs attack, each type of leg has a different animation. The bipedal legs here kick with that left leg, so there's a little bit of reach both in front of you as well as out to that left side. The reverse joint legs have a straightforward kick with a narrow hitbox, but they actually have farther range than all the rest of the leg types, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Quad legs have a really wide hitbox that'll hit on all sides, pretty much around the entirety of the AC. And tank legs are less of a kick and more of a straightforward bump or tackle. When it comes to the damage that you do with a kick, the scaling is entirely dependent on your weight, with the exception of reverse joints, which also scale with weight, but just do more damage. Looking at bipedal legs, or really everything that isn't reverse joint, your breaking point to increase your damage is going to be 50,000. So anything 50,000 weight or less is going to do 311 base damage, no matter how low you go. Your damage is going to increase based on your weight in a sort of bell curve. Everything from 50,000 up to about 80,000 will increase fairly rapidly. Once you hit that 80,000 mark or a little bit beyond, the weight to damage ratio starts to really taper off. So even though you get more, if you want the most for your weight, you're looking at right around the 80 to 90,000 mark for the most damage. As I said earlier, reverse joints are the exception to the rule, whereas all the other legs' base damage below 50,000 weight is 311, reverse joints is 373. Scaling-wise, it works the exact same. You're looking right around that 80 to 90,000 weight range to get the most damage for your weight. After that, it definitely starts to taper off, but just the overall damage scaling is increased with reverse joints. Next up, let's talk the range that you can kick from. Again, with the exception of reverse joints, all the rest of the legs are the same. You're looking at 100 meters if you're on the ground, a little bit less if you're airborne. So if we back it up to, let's say 110, we're gonna miss. You can see we just totally whiff it, and it leaves about 10 to 12 meters left. So 100 meters is really the point you're looking for if you want to make contact with any of the legs but reverse joints. We'll look at them next. Ever the exception to the rule, reverse joints can actually hit from 120 meters out. So we'll back it up again to, let's say 125. And you see we totally miss, even with just a 5-meter difference. So 120 is the range you can attack from with reverse joints. Next up, we're going to talk hitboxes. Looking at the bipedal legs, you'll see they do this sweeping left kick, and that'll hit anything that's in front of you or slightly off to the left of you, but you're kind of out of luck if they're behind you, to the right, anything like that. The tetrapod legs have arguably the best hitbox, and they can be really difficult to avoid. That big spinning attack will hit anything and everything entirely around you, behind, off to the side, or in front, and it has a surprising amount of range on it. The tanks, of course, with that jumping boost attack, only really hit in front of you, though they have a surprising width to them, so they can hit things that are fairly beside you, but not to the same range that the tetrapods can. And then looking at reverse joints, as I said before, their attack is very straightforward with a really narrow hitbox, so good luck hitting anything off to the sides, and it's relatively easy to miss, but they do have that increased range, so I think overall, kicking-wise, the reverse joints really feel the best. That extra range seems to really help them hit in multiplayer. Tip number 1 when it comes to kicking is you want to make sure you're hard locked on. Since that allows you to circle around the target and your camera just to stay centered on them, it makes it very easy to hit with your kicks as opposed to your soft lock. Using soft lock, you're 100% reliant on where you're facing, so even if you're close by, even if you're right beside them, it's quite easy to miss. Tip number 2 is what I like to call the double kick. Did you know it's not actually just your kick you can damage your opponent with while assault boosting? You actually can ram them as well. So the ram is very standard across the board, even for reverse joints. It does 44 damage and does just that middle section of the bar worth of stagger, and that doesn't change depending on weight. The double kick in question, though, is actually relying on this damage and stagger you get from the ram, and then immediately going into a kick to increase the amount of damage and stagger you do to your opponent. Let's take a peek. So you can see that increased stagger damage that varies from just your normal kick. We'll compare it again with just the regular kick. It does just past those middle lines worth of stagger bar. We'll let it drop down and we'll do the double kick. You can see it's not an incredible amount more, but it definitely adds up and it can make or break the difference of getting a stagger on your opponent. The timing, however, can be a little tricky. You have to click it right when you hear the impact of you ramming into them. Any later than that, and it just won't kick. Let's take a peek at what that looks like. You can see, even though I clicked the kick button, it was at the end of that sound effect, and it didn't do anything at all. So it really needs to happen right when you ram them. Tip number 3 is going to be related to that. Interestingly, if you wait just a little bit longer on that timing, you can actually go straight into another ram. I don't know how practical it is, but it's certainly interesting, and it might be useful in some battle strategies. Tip number 4 is going to be chain boost kicking. Once you stagger your opponent, you can continuously ram and kick them and keep them almost indefinitely staggered, depending on what extensions they're using and if they can get away. And your weapons can help out a lot if they have a lot of stagger damage. And tip number 5 is to use your boost kick to increase your air time. So you can just go from one kick into the other, barely use any energy at all, and stay in the air for a long time. It's useful for getting away from people in PvP, getting yourself back onto the map, especially if it's grid 012, where all the missile boats like to go off to the side and just hang out in the air while there's nothing you can do. So feel free, go out there, kick that missile boat's ass, and then kick yourself back onto the level without using almost any energy at all. See, I can stay up here a really long time just kicking and not anything else. Way longer than I could with just an assault boost or a regular boost. Also useful for infinite flight builds. Just like you can use weapon recoil to keep yourself up, you can use your kick as well. So that's going to be it for this guide. Let me know in the comments if you have any other tips or tricks when it comes to kicking, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. There'll be way more on the way. I'll see you next time.